Just before we get started, can I ask all our members if you've got copies of the addendum? Everyone seen that? It was circulated yesterday. Right, Sonia, could you... that's the Stanley Accounts Rotum. Okay. Yeah, addendum, you got it? You seen it? Yeah. Save delaying the proceedings. Can't proceed until... Not signing off, not a hard shutdown. Yeah, hard shutdown. Turn the whole thing off. Hold the button in for 7 seconds. That'll just stop it. Yeah, it needs to be a hard shutdown. Hold the off button in for 7 seconds. That's it. You're off. Start it again. I'll start with the... Right, good evening everybody and our visitors tonight. Welcome to the Development Committee, 22nd of February 2018. Our usual little emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit to the chamber. Our assembly point will be in the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please don't delay your evacuation by collecting any belongings, and please don't return into the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded, and if you have a mobile phone with you, then please turn it off or to silent. Thank you. Yeah. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Milne, who's been substituted by Councillor Gooding. Councillor Newport, who's been substituted by Councillor Oldham. Don't believe there are any others. No, thank you. So item 2 is substitute members. Item 3, non-members attending. We have Councillors Rowe, Dray and Sperring. We have item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of February 2018. Happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record of that meeting. Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. Start with Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a declaration of non-pecuniary interest in item 8. Both the applicant and the member of staff mentioned are known to me in a professional capacity.
Mr. Sperring? You don't need to stand for the me.
in relation to being a member of Raleigh Town Council,
Thank you.
non-pecuniary interest.
Item 9, Mr Chairman, as a member of Raleigh Town Council, and I'm acquainted with neighbours of the site.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Chairman, same as Councillor Drive.
Okay. Councillor Griffin.
Non-pecuniary interest, item 8, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for the benefit of our visitors tonight, the way it works. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stanley, missed you there.
Non-pecuniary interest as I'm a council member of the Royth Parish.
Thank you. The way the meeting works is that one of our officers will present the item. There'll then be the opportunity for anyone who's pre-registered to make a presentation, and we've got a couple of visitors there. Then our non-member councillors get the opportunity to speak. Then it's open to the members of the committee to have their debate and ultimately take a vote. Although there might be things that you hear that you either agree with or don't agree with, unfortunately there isn't an opportunity for public contribution to the meeting. I believe most of our visitors have come in for item 9, so I do propose to take that one first, if that's okay with everyone. The thing that's not okay with everyone, though, is the computer. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a maximum of about 5 minutes while it thinks about life and its position in life. Obviously item 9 doesn't have quite as much information as 6 and 7, so we'll make a start. Okay.
Members, the application site is edged red on this plan and is close to the junction of Eastwood Road and Dawes Heath Road. Just to the north of the site is a building in use as a day nursery. Attached just to the south is a building as a window shop. And then there are other commercial uses at ground floor in these premises here on Eastwood Road. And there's a residential flatted block here and also some residential properties in Dawes Heath Road to the south. I can take you to photo 1. You'll see the front elevation of the building. It's a 2-storey building in the main, but with a single-storey element.
This is where it went slow last time. Try the digitizer. Carry on talking as best you can.
Yep. So the photo should come through shortly. But this is the ground floor plan. So this is the proposal, which... It's okay. So this is the ground floor of the premises to which the application relates, and it's proposed to change the use from retail to a restaurant and taking up the entire ground floor. In the main, it's a sitting area, and there's a couple of function rooms again for sitting within part of the restaurant. The kitchen's located to the rear, and then there are some customer toilets. I'm going to take you to the first floor plan. So the proposal includes change of use to provide a 1-bed flat at first floor, which is this area of the first floor here. A small part of the first floor would be part of the restaurant, providing a staff rest area and some staff toilets. Take you to plan 5, please. So this is the site frontage, so Eastwood Road along the site here, and the proposal is to use the existing vehicular access into the site off Eastwood Road with the provision of 7 car parking spaces on the site frontage. The entrance to the restaurant would be just to the side here. The parking standard for an A3 restaurant use is a maximum, and based on the gross floor area would come out at some 34 spaces. 7 spaces are proposed, and this has to be considered in light of the location of the application site. where the parking standard allows for a lower parking provision on site where you are near a main urban area with good public transport connections and other car parks in the vicinity. This application proposes the same number of parking spaces as the previous application that came before members this time last year. That application proposed an A3, A4 use, which was restaurant and drinking establishment for the whole building, so without any flatted accommodation, and that would have had a greater maximum parking standard. So the 7 parking spaces here is no different in terms of it being policy compliant with that previous scheme. If I can take you to the extract from the allocations plan. The dark lined boundary here is the extent of the town centre boundary, and the application site is just where my light's shining there. So it is within the town centre of Rayleigh, where uses such as restaurants are considered appropriate. The loss of the retail in this instant isn't of a concern, given that the surrounding uses within the sort of secondary shopping area here retain a mix of retail. There is a fast food outlet just opposite the site on the corner, and a number of different uses within that area. It's considered that the proposed restaurant use would add to the vitality and viability of the town centre location. In terms of the parking, there is a car park in Webster's Way, which is a short walk from the site, and also a bus stop immediately opposite the site on Eastwood Road. Concern has been raised in relation to potential noise and disturbance to residential properties, some of which are located within the town centre boundary here, and then some on Dorseith Road just outside. The noise and disturbance from the restaurant obviously would be limited by the opening times, which are set by condition, and also have to be viewed in the context of the town centre location, where there are a number of restaurant uses with flatted accommodation above in this area here, and the general background noise level, which would be higher in an urban area. The children's day nursery immediately adjacent to the site is generally open at different times to the restaurant, although the restaurant does propose to open at a lunchtime service as well as into the evening. The impact on the children's day nursery, given that the restaurant use would be contained within the building, shouldn't give rise to too much noise and disturbance that would be harmful to that use adjoining. There is a condition proposed to prevent use of the forecourt and the rear garden area by patrons of the restaurant, so you wouldn't have that noise external to the building associated with the use. The recommendation, Chairman, is for approval subject to the conditions stated.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers on this one, so it's Councillor Mercer first from Rayleigh Town Council. Like to come up. Just turn the mic on, please. As usual, with all our speakers, they have a maximum of 5 minutes, and I'll let them know when they've got a minute to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Good evening. I'm Councillor Deborah Mercer, Chairman of Rayleigh Town Council Planning Committee, and I'm here tonight to reiterate the Planning Committee's objection to this application. We feel the proposed change of use from an A1 shop to an A3 restaurant is inappropriate and is detrimental to the residential area that it is positioned. There has been 22 objections from residents, and these were considered reasonable by the officer but not considered sufficient to refuse planning permission. Perhaps, bearing in mind the number of residents who have raised these concerns, that greater consideration should be given to the suitability of this application. Plans that will be detrimental to their health and well-being by having noise and smell disturbance as well as invasion of privacy. There are some businesses that flout the law, and Rochford Enforcement, although working under extreme pressure with a reduced staff, will be unable to act quickly to stop any infringements should they occur. Although the conditions state that the front and rear of the premises are excluded from this application, how will patrons be stopped from smoking and causing a disturbance outside? There is unacceptable internal circulation on the forecourt. There are not enough car parking spaces, 4 in total designated car parking, 1 disabled and 2 staff. Most people will not walk from the car parks in Webster's Way or Castle Road. It is too far for them, especially in bad weather. They will park in roads surrounding the area, parking restrictions or not. Otherwise, they will use spaces in Thermoshield and the Rainbow Nursery. What will happen when customers or delivery vehicles drive up over the pavement to find there are no spaces? There is not enough room to safely turn around off the highway, and the committee disagrees with the officer's opinion. Stated in the council's own document, the Parking Standards Design and Good Practice Supplementary Planning Document, December 2010, page 53, the parking standards for use Class A3 restaurants and cafes says in all cases adequate provision should be made for the parking and turning of service vehicles to the site off the highway. This will not be the case. Vehicles, delivery or customer will have to reverse onto a busy road by an extremely busy junction, back over the pavement to the detriment of pedestrians old and young, mobility scooters, cyclists and cars, an accident waiting to happen. The 2 staff parking spaces will be blocked in by customers. What happens if one needs to go home? Will there be only two staff who use the car park working there? Will the others walk, cycle? There are no cycle provisions available for staff to park a bicycle, even though SPD 2.10.1 states there should be a minimum of 1 space for staff and 1 covered space for the resident. Where is a designated car parking space for the resident? Will they also have to pay to park at the town car parks or use the residential streets? There is also no provision as to where the refuse bins will be placed. There needs to be separate bins for both the tenant and the restaurant, and conditions put in place to limit any noise that may occur from any glass that will be placed in them. Therefore, the Town Council requests that this application is refused on the grounds that it fails to comply with SPD 2.10.1 and the Parking Standards Design and Good Practice Supplementary Planning Document, December 2010, page 53, the parking standards for use Class 3A, A3, restaurants and cafes. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mrs. Covello. Again, up to 5 minutes. I'll let you know when
Yeah.
you've got a minute to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to put my objections to this application. I would just like to let you know that I live at number 4 Dawesheath Road, and my garden is L-shaped, and so 3/4 of my garden joins the boundary to this property, and also my neighbour, number 2, joins the boundary of this property. I've been in the catering business for over 30 years, so I know all about restaurants, and this place would be a really good potential buyer for a restaurateur, bearing in mind a garden is there. If you look at all the restaurants in Rayleigh, most of them want to have diners outside, so they use the front of their properties to put those couple of tables. If we change the use of this premises to a restaurant, the next step will be to use that back garden. And the worry there for me is the privacy of our properties there. At one point, we are 3 metres away from the rear garden. Recently, Mr. Sutton has cleared all the garden. It has trees, bushes. We now have the privilege of seeing Eastwood Road and King George's Park from our property. So it was obviously an intention there or something to help the selling of this property for a future restaurateur. Also, we've mentioned about smokers. They're more or less they're going to go in the garden to smoke, and that is then going to go onto our property. And for the norm today, it seems to be acceptable for vile language. As my family and my grandchildren have to endure that as well, that's something to be considered. And then in the winter nights or when it's getting dark, the smokers need lights. Those lights are going to impact on our properties. Majority of our residents nearby have animals. We have dogs. Any slight sounds or noise, we're going to start the dogs barking. We have families who are going to then be endured by the noise of this property. they're going to encourage celebrations. Nobody has a quiet celebration, and people, when they drink, do get loud. I'm not opposing to people celebrating, but I'm opposing, is objecting to the noise that's going to, not just on our residents in Dawes Heath, but the older residents opposite and on the side. It's already been said about the parking. Again, being in the restaurant trade, deliveries don't come at a certain time. They come early in the morning, they come late at night. This, again, is a danger to all around trying to do a delivery. Restaurants by nature are open till late, and so the issue mentioned will impact on our evenings. Current use of premises is 9 to 5, and the garden isn't used. A change of use will have all these negative effects, and potential buyers will clearly want to use this garden. The change of use will be unfair to the neighbouring community who were here enjoying their properties first. I just want to highlight that to everybody. And just to wind up and trying to say that, dogs, children, elderly and all residents living nearby will be affected by diners and those wishing to celebrate with noise and excitement, something a shop does not or will not cause or does not cause at the moment. Also, the question about waste. We don't want to encourage any rats or any problems there. What has been implemented about that. So these are just some of my points that I wanted to raise tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we go to our visiting members first, and Councillor Dray.
Notwithstanding the application's inclusion within the Rayleigh Town Centre boundary and the secondary shopping frontage area, this application is on the outer limits of those areas, being within a mainly residential area which has 24-hour parking restrictions with no official 24-hour monitoring of such parking restrictions. The officer's report states that customers of the restaurant will use the existing car parks in Webster's Way and Castle Road. In reality, I believe that users of the restaurant will not park in these public car parks, as human nature tells us that customers of the restaurant will seek to park as near to the restaurant as possible, which will cause unnecessary noise and nuisance to the local residents, which includes a retirement complex and an adjacent children's nursery. The forecourts of the shops opposite the site are also in constant use by customers of the shops and residents of the flats above the shops. Excessive on-street parking can be detrimental to highway safety and efficiency. The application is adjacent to the already busy junction formed by Dawes Heath Road, Queen's Road and Eastwood Road, and the additional traffic would only increase the possible danger and nuisance caused by customers of the proposed restaurant and the occupants of the flat attempting to enter or reverse from the premises, as there would be little or no room for vehicles to manoeuvre within the site. In my view, there would be insufficient parking for the residents of the flat, restaurant staff and delivery vehicles. I note in particular, Mr Chairman, the absence of comments from County Highway Authority and Environmental Health. In addition, there are no details regarding waste management on site or details regarding the removal and storage of waste from the proposed flat or from the restaurant. In my view, this application, if passed, will cause a noise nuisance and disturbance which will be detrimental to the amenity of nearby residents beyond that which is reasonably expected in a residential area. I would urge the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I just ask the officers to note that Finchfield wasn't mentioned, and that is another area of which the elderly residents do live in. Thank you. Apart from the concerns that I have for our residents, which of course have to be paramount to us, I do have serious concerns about parking. Our officers have already said that there will be 7 spaces, and in fact, this area should have 34. We have very busy side roads, taking into account Queen's Road, which at the moment has got horrific problems down there with parking. There's accidents down there happening almost monthly. So parking down there, we know it's going to happen. We know people aren't going to go park in our main car parks and walk across. Also concerns of the nursery. You know, the children come and go all day long from that nursery. Can I also please ask the officer to have a slide up for the parking again, please? Thank you. So we see parking bays 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and from my memory, along the side there, next to that on the right-hand side of our picture, is the nursery. So how are they going to get into the how's the nursery mums going to still use their area? Are they still going to go in through that front, or is that going to be redesigned?
So the nursery have an existing drop curb access that's adjacent to this bit here. It's fairly narrow. There's a number of trees just abutting the footway here, and then there's an out point here for the nursery as well. So you can go in and round and out. So obviously this land that's shown here is within the application site. So it's not for the nursery's use, and so they would have to ensure that their parking arrangements were contained within their land, and there is an in-out access for the nursery separate from this site here.
Thank you, Katie. You've hit the nail on the head. It's very narrow. There's trees, there's a wall, there's all sorts there. So my concern would be the children. Also, car parking spaces 1 and 2. So how will 3 and 4 leave the property? With one, if there's car parked in 1 and 2.
So 3 and 4 would have to be sorry. So parking spaces 3 and 4 could clearly only be occupied, and then the staff members stay until the customers parking in 1 and 2 had left.
So, Chairman, quite a mishmash really of parking, which brings me back again to the 7 parking spaces when there should be 34. I think I've made my points, but, you know, noise as well for our residents is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sperring.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my colleagues have covered most of the points, but I think just to sum up, apart from the other issues that have already been raised, I believe the potential lighting, noise and general disturbance level are in excess of what residents living in a predominantly residential area should be expected to tolerate.
Thank you. Right, okay. So now to the members of the committee. Councillor Steptoe, you indicated first.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, if I may. With regards to the parking there, perhaps officers can correct me if I'm wrong here. Isn't it correct that people parking in there should be able to ingress and egress the parking area in forward motion? So where is the turning circle within the car park?
Do you got another question as well? Should we just line up the questions first?
The other question was, the first speaker quoted a standard and a reference number. Would the officers care to remind us of that? I'll be honest to say I can't recall it from the just from the reference number.
Okay. We'll take the speakers and then if you come back with all the questions. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. I have quite a few concerns about this application, mainly due to the close proximity of domestic properties and the retirement homes. Many restaurants today are fitted out with widescreen TVs, sound systems, they often have entertainment evenings, performers coming, music laid on, etc. It's quite possible in the future that the rear garden might be used for al fresco dining. Also, there is absolutely no question that people will be outside smoking, and while they're out there chatting to each other, so there'll be some background noise from that sort of activity as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask, is it possible, I know it was in the folder, to see the picture of the photograph taken from the front, and if not, could we possibly have a Google Street View? Google Map Street View.
We'll try.
That was
that.
One thing I was going to ask for. I just think just to put it in context, it helps. A few points I've got. Bins and waste management. I'd like to have more information regarding that. Right, 7 parking spaces. We've heard that should be 34. A quarter of 34 is 8.5. So what they are offering is less than a quarter. I understand the idea that if it's in a town centre, there may be fewer parking requirements. We've now just been told that 2 of those parking spaces are for staff. So in actual fact, there's only 5 parking spaces for customers, which I'm not going to do my maths again, but if 8.5 is a quarter of 34, then I think that we are really aiming low here on the parking provision, which I think is unacceptable. Are there any conditions regarding times for deliveries? For if it's a restaurant, I guess there will be food deliveries coming to it. Are there any conditions regarding any use of outside or the requirement for them to have a smoking shelter that is clearly designated so people aren't allowed to sort of just smoke where they want to, which would cause a disturbance to the neighbouring area? Having heard the town council speak, I do believe, having seen this, that there is a real issue here with noise pollution that is going to be detrimental to a residential area. So those are the main points, but I would really like to see a street view or the photograph. Thank you.
We're working on getting that up. Councillor Mrs Hoy.
I just wanted to bring back about the parking, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. I thought under health and safety rules, I agree with Steptoe. I thought you had to have a car must be able to exit, sort of thing, whether I'm wrong on that. But I'd just like to say, coming back to the children, I know it's not part of this application, but when you've got to remember they're probably between sort of like birth up to 4 that go there, sort of thing. Or when you pick children up, the first thing they do is run. That's what they do, sort of thing. And my concern is that it is quite dangerous coming off that driveway onto, especially if you're driving off there at sort of you've gone for a meal at sort of like 5 and you're coming out at 7, sort of thing. Because I don't think people realise how busy Eastwood Road is, sort of thing. So I just wanted to, I don't know if that is under health and safety, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. Several things have already been mentioned, but there are still concerns. I'd like to know where the safety area is should fire start in the kitchen. Also, the access or exit of the upstairs flat, which if we've got cars parked, they can't run down the side of the building as cars are blocking the area. And you wouldn't necessarily move a car if you've got a fire in there, because that would be the last thing you would do. exhaust fumes from the cars that are parked at the car park, even if they reverse into the area that we're talking about, the exhaust fumes would be to the nursery and not elsewhere, which could be an environmental health problem. I'd like to know that, and also car park number 2 seems to be a lot smaller than all the other ones. Is that for disabled or not? Thank you.
Councillor Mountain, you've got your view there. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Sorry, so here, so that's part of the building, so this all is the application site, and then to the rear of those, yes, I mean obviously if we panned around Dawsheath Road, you would see a residential property just immediately, you know, on the corner behind this property on this corner.
Can I just start in terms of when we got that view out, in terms of the parking, there seems to be a fairly larger space than 7 car parking space for the provision. And is that the nursery next door? That's the nursery next door.
Yeah.
So parking spaces 1 and 2 would have to go on that property in order to. Is that correct?
No. Well,
I'm confused about the parking.
This was pretty much the photograph that I had that wouldn't load earlier. So this is the application site, so it's got a large frontage which wouldn't change in terms of the design, but obviously it's proposed for a restaurant use, so signage would change. These 2 cars that are parked here are parked in what would be spaces 3 and 4, so they're at 90 degrees to what the parking layout shows. They're at 90 degrees to what the parking layout shows, and then you've got another 2 spaces here. What they've done on the parking layout is left enough room to entrance the building, so it might look like you could fit more on, but you can't if you want to provide enough space to turn within the site. And then they're going to the parking layout is these cars will be parked at 90 degrees to the ones that are parked there now, and you'd have 5 spaces along here, with the final space in the position where the light is sort of shining there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Which one's the disabled one?
So the disabled space that they're proposing is number 1. So it's adjacent to the footway that would enter the building, so you've got more space to open the door of the car to the side to let people out.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that the parking at the front is mainly for staff. A great concern there, looking at the photograph that we have there, is that there is no barrier between the 2 properties. Cars would easily be able to reverse or go forward into the other property, and I've no doubt they will go forward or reverse. That's one of my great concerns, is the security. If it did go through, a condition of a barrier, I think would be essential. Thank you.
Okay. Members, just as chairman, there's a couple of things I do need to point out. On the motion for approval, which we haven't got to yet, item 4 in the conditions clearly states that there's no approval for use of the rear garden at all in connection with this business. So that would be a separate application. So it's fair to say that the garden is not for consideration for use within this by condition. It's also fair to say that as a furniture shop, the site is used to deliveries from larger vehicles, loading and offloading things at a variety of times, and that the site is well versed in a variety of vehicles coming and going from the property. It also needs to be said that the proprietors of the application site can't be held responsible for the way for behaviour of people on a private piece of land belonging to the nursery, however concerning we may find that. It is private land. So I just needed to throw those things into the equation. The other thing that was mentioned was potential for performances within the property rather than it being used just as a restaurant. then I think there are licensing conditions which would be considered outside of this meeting. So I just needed to make those points. Would you like to carry on, please?
So I can come back on some of the questions that were raised. I might have already answered, some of them might have already been answered, so sorry if I repeat myself. Turning in the car park rather than vehicles having to exit in reverse gear. So they have designed the layout so that there is a 6 metre space behind each of the parking spaces. So that would enable people to reverse and then exit the car park in forward gear. The parking standard for restaurant use is 1 space per 5 square metres. If you take the gross floor space of the restaurant, which includes the first floor element, which is the staff rest area, it's about 34 spaces. That's the maximum. It's a maximum standard for uses of this nature. There isn't at present a condition relating to deliveries or delivery times. It would seem reasonable that the restaurant would want deliveries to happen when the restaurant weren't open to the public, given that you're going to have to transport all the delivered, stock through the restaurant and all that disturbance to your customers. So you'd hope that the car park would be fairly free at the time when the deliveries were scheduled. There is a condition, as the chairman mentioned, about the use of the outside area to the rear garden and to the frontage. Given members' concerns, we could probably tighten that up a bit so that enforcement were very clear about what it is we're restricting in terms of customers not utilising the outside space in relation to the restaurant at all, not just eating and drinking, but congregating, chatting, smoking, etc. In relation to bin and refuse waste management, there is a gate that you can't just see off this. So there's a passageway within the site to the side of the premises that allows access to the rear of the site. It's about 1 metre wide, and potentially refuse and waste can be stored potentially in some sort of shelter. If that was deemed necessary, we could impose some conditions around that to the rear, and then for that to be brought out when it needed to be collected from the site frontage. That could work for the restaurant and the residential flat. Obviously, they'd both need refuse arrangements. I had something to do with a barrier for the car park. Obviously, no barriers are proposed in relation to the application. There's nothing stopping the applicant putting in an application for some sort of barrier arrangement. At the moment, I think the openness enables reasonable use so that it can function well between the different uses. But this application is just concerning the land that is within the site, and their parking would be contained within that area. An exit for the existing upstairs flat. There is a separate exit to the rear of the building, and there is that side passage to allow evacuation if and when necessary. Had exhaust.
I'll bring in the other councillors speaking for now.
Yeah.
Councillor Merrick.
Had exhaust fumes. And odours. Was it odours?
I think you may slightly
Microphone, please.
It doesn't seem to be sufficiently positive. I would prefer something along the lines that the rear garden or forecourt must not be used in connection with the dining bar area without further permission, rather than it being, might give the impression that it doesn't actually need any approval at all. So I think it needs to be a condition that it mustn't be used at all. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been mentioned about smoking, and but I haven't seen for many of the site plans, is there a specific designated smoking area?
No.
So they haven't given any indication of where that may be then? So obviously that might have a bearing on noise and affect people's.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still not quite clear how the emergency exit from the upstairs flat, when you've got bins down the sideway and you've got cars parked in front of the gate, which you will have, how is that occupant or occupants going to get out? I mean, you can have more than 2 people up there. You can have 4 or 5 people. How are they going to get out if there is a fire in the restaurant? There is no means of getting out, no way clear of getting away from the premises if you've got bins down the sideway.
Means of escape would be controlled by building regulations rather than planning permission at this point. Councillor Oldham.
Chairman, I'd just like to remind members that if you look at page 9.5 on the report, paragraph 10, there's a statement there that says about opening hours, and these can be controlled by a planning condition. Now, we have had a precedent in the town centre where we have put a planning condition on which restricts the hours, and the operators of the premises have subsequently obtained a licence to go on until Lord knows what hour in the evening, and have had the licence, have had the planning condition removed. So I'd just like to remind people that they're not all honest.
Thank you. Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to say, in terms of the conditions that are, I agree with Councillor Merrick if we could tighten that one. And also, you did mention about adding a condition to the bins and waste storage. So if it does go that way, I would like that to be added as a condition. I'm still concerned in terms of the parking. I think there's not enough parking provisions, and the noise pollution in relation to being detrimental to a residential area. Just want to make those 2 points.
That's Mrs. Hoy again.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the parking. Parking's 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 would be blocking in 3 and 4. Yeah, sort of thing. I just thought under health and safety rules, they had to have an in and an out. No? Am I wrong on that?
They don't have to have an in and out access arrangement onto the highway. So parking spaces 3 and 4 would be at 90 degrees to where these 2 vehicles are positioned here. And when 1 and 2 were occupied, they wouldn't be able to leave. But once 1 and 2 had left, they could reverse out and then out of the site in forward gear.
Right, okay. I just wanted to ask you, because I'm still a bit concerned that there's no fence, there's no barrier going down the side of it, the side of the property. Could we put that in as a condition?
No barrier here, you're concerned about?
Yeah, you know, like a fence, to stop, to try and protect the children. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, the application is the application.
The application is the application, and I think there'll be nothing stopping the applicant coming forward at a later date and putting an application before you for such an arrangement. How a barrier would affect the parking arrangements between the 2 sites if the use were to go ahead, and there want to be a degree of flexibility in terms of where people park between the 2 users potentially. Obviously a barrier would clearly have implications for that, so it's not within the application before us tonight.
Right, thank you. Members, I think almost everyone has spoken on this one, and there's been a lot of points made. However, at this moment in time, we have a motion for approval printed on page 9.7, which I'm duty bound to put to you. However, there was concern about condition 4, and strangely enough, this was brought over pre the meeting, that the language of condition 4 be amended to give the absolute clarity that there is no condition for anything whatsoever in the rear garden, and there would need to perhaps be some informative with regard to bins and the waste management strategy on the site. And that could probably be conditioned. So we've got where we are. We know where we are, where we stand with our planning rules and regulations. So members, with all that borne in mind, those members in favour of the approval, please indicate. We'll have to do it. Those against? Right. That item is not approved. I therefore look to the membership. Councillor Mountain, you know what comes next?
I'm going to move for refusal on the grounds of lack of parking and on the grounds that it's a change of use from a carpet shop that is open during business hours to a restaurant that is open extended hours is going to be detrimental to the residential area.
Councillor Steptoe.
I was just going to add to that with the concerns that were raised about the boundaries having insufficient protection from the
Sorry, did you say you were going to second him as well?
Yes, I'll second that as well. The boundaries between the properties, I think that should be put down, that there is a concern, and that should be part of the refusal.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we have a motion for refusal that has been put and seconded based on the lack of, the lack of parking in relation to guidance, the impact on amenity through the change of opening hours, and the concern with regard to the boundary. Okay. Yeah. Right. The officers will insert their appropriate technical language. So those members in favour of the rejection of this application, please indicate. Those against? I'll abstain on that one. That item is refused. Thank you. Well, our visitors are welcome to stay for the next hour and a half, but if you wish to leave, you may. You won't get out that way. Right. I believe one of our other visitors is for item 8, which is a technical referral. So I don't think that's complicated, so I'll deal with that one. Or members will deal with that one. So item 8 is 15 Keswick Close, Rayleigh. This isn't one that would normally come before us, but it's because the applicant has got related to a member of staff. No. Going on this one.
So it's in the application site is located in a residential area. It's the area outlined in red on the plan here, and the proposal is for a ramped access to the front of the property, which you'll see on an elevation. Can you turn that 90 degrees, please, Claire? At the top. Yeah.
There we go.
So there you go. So hopefully this gives members a clear indication of what is proposed. The ramped access protrudes out from the building by a metre, runs along the length. The existing front door is here, so there's a small platform to turn. There are some stepped points there, and that is the nature of the application. I think we have a street view, so you can see the... Might have been needed to be slightly higher. Oh no, sorry. That's fine. Yep, just turn around. Yep. So, and it's to this property here. So it will run along here, jutting out by a metre, around the corner to the front door with a little platform, and sufficient car parking area will be retained within the site frontage. So that this usually would be a delegated application, but because the applicant is related to a member of staff, it is before you tonight. The recommendation, Chairman, is for approval.
Does any member feel they need to comment on this? Right. Well, I'm going to let Councillor Steptoe move the approval. Anyone like to second that? Those members in favour of the approval, please indicate. Thank you. That item is approved. Thank you. You two are welcome to stay for the next hour and a half if you wish. Or right. Now move on to the substantive items of the evening. Item 6. Again, just remind members on both items 6 and 7, there's an amount of information in the addendum which I've checked you've all had the opportunity to see. Thank you. So, when you're ready.
Chairman, this is a reserved matters application for the proposed development of 192 dwellings in association with Phase 1 of the development approved for up to 500 dwellings by Outline Planning Commission at land north of London Road and south of Roarth Lane, Rayleigh in 2016. There are intended to be 3 phases of development at the site. Therefore, this relates to just the first phase, which is the northern area immediately to the south of Roarth Lane. So the area we're looking at, this is on the approved parameters plan as part of the outline application. So we're going to be looking at the beige areas 1, 2, 3, these parcels here, and the secondary link road, which is here linking to Roarth Industrial Estate Road there. The site currently consists of open land with an existing tree located within a central position on the site. Approximately there, the tree is. It should be noted that the outline planning application is the overarching decision which looked at matters relating to surface water drainage, highway implications, construction management and 106 contributions, to name but a few. It is not for the application currently before us to revisit the matters already considered as part of this outline application, many of which are controlled by conditions imposed on the outline application. The surface water drainage in relation to Phase 1 in particular has been agreed as part of the outline application. If we have Plan 2, please, Katie. So the red line, so it covers these parcels here, and then this one around here, just highlighting it for you. So the red line shows the boundary of the proposal we're currently considering. The mix of the proposed dwellings would be as follows. So we're looking at 35 one-beds, 47 two-beds, 52 three-beds, 54 beds and 8 5-bed units. The proposal also incorporates a secondary access road, so this link here, from Roarth Industrial Estate and other internal roads and accesses. There's also an amenity area to the centre, so we're looking at this area here. And to the south-east, close to the boundary with the school, we also have a small amenity section just here. There's also a proposed slight alteration to the affordable housing provision. So the key material planning considerations are access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, and those are matters I'm going to go through just now. So with regards to access, the proposal uses a mix of feeder roads, so this is what would be the feeder road here. We've also got shared surface roads, such as this area up here, Mews courts and private drives. So these are some of the private drive areas accessing some of these properties along here as an example. County Highways does not object but seeks conditions be imposed. Some are already included within the outline application, but those considered reasonable have also been included as part of the reserved matters application. With regards to parking, the resident parking space numbers are adhered to. The cycle parking provision is also adhered to, and where there are no garages or stores for some of the units, cycle parking storage can be provided in the garden areas, and that's been suggested by planning condition. The number of visitor spaces exceeds the requirements. There are 9 spaces within the requirement which are allocated to certain plots rather than being unallocated, but as the total number of visitor spaces exceeds requirements by 24 spaces anyway, this is not considered objectionable. County Highways do not object to the visitor parking proposed. What was the plan on that? Plan 10 on that? Oh, I know I can show you. Thank you. So this is just a plan which shows the visitor parking arrangements at the site. So all the orange are the visitor parking spaces, the unallocated ones. So you can see how they're scattered throughout the development in locations which are easily accessible to various visitors across the site. The power two-wheeler provision, which we're going to sort of come on to, we've got a couple of spaces there and a couple there. So the power two-wheeler provision is also adhered to, and the disabled bay provision is considered acceptable subject to a condition requiring a further space to be converted to a visitor bay. So the disabled bays are located around near to the apartment blocks. So we've got some up here, and we've also got a few down in this area as well. The apartment blocks have the wheelchair accessible units within them, hence the reason they've been located in those areas. The parking bay sizes are also adhered to. The car barns proposed meet the bay size criteria, and they should be prevented from having doors, as this would then require them to meet the garage sizing. That's been controlled by suggested condition in the application. The double garages for 8 dwellings are not to the 7 metre length that we would normally require, but these dwellings actually already have 2 off-street parking spaces. So the garage sizing is not crucial here, because the garage is actually in addition to what we would normally seek in terms of numbers on those particular plots. The 6 metre reversing distance are also provided. We could have plan 2, please. So moving now on to the appearance of the development.
Conditions are on the addendum.
We've got 5 character areas that they're looking at. So we're having proposed the rural edge, which is the section which runs down this side and across the front of Aurora Lane. So that will be larger type properties, more sympathetic to the softer landscape that we've got around that area, and they're looking at cottage and barn type proposals in terms of style there. They've also got what they're referring to as a school approach, so this is the area sort of coming down around this kind of area, so it's more urban in character, a lot more terrace type units around there. This is where the proposed school will be located, and we've also got the proposed healthcare facility there, not as part of this application, but just in terms of showing you proximity of the phase 1 residential element to what else we're expecting on the site. We've also got an area called Oak View. That's near to where we've got the oak tree and this little lobby green area here. Hill Green is the section coming down here where a lot of the dwellings are going to front onto the open space section here. And we've also got some Mews Courts area. There's 3 of those which are more sort of self-contained units of properties. So if we could look at plan 3, please. So this is the street scene, an example of the street scenes that we're looking at on the site. So it's quite a traditional design. Street scene 3. Yeah, so we're looking at 12 house types. We're also looking at flat over ground, and there's also apartment blocks on the development. So this actually shows, so street scene 1 and 2, yeah, there, so the angle looking, 1 is looking sort of down that way, 2 is as you would drive into the estate, you'd be looking down the road there. So here we've got like kind of the detached, larger style properties as you come into the entranceway to the development. In terms of colour, material usage, we're looking at red and buff brick, cream render, cream, white, grey, green and black boarding are all proposed. County Urban Design do not object to the proposal. A revised plan looked to address some of the appearance of a prominent corner dwelling near to the school, and that's been addressed as part of this application. If we could look at plan 4, please. So this is just another street scene example, but this is actually showing what you would see from Roarth Lane. So street scene... So street scene 3, so the top element here, where you've got the 2 apartment blocks forming this corner here, and then looking across you've got some semi-detached properties, and then coming further along you've got more detached as you get to more the Greenbelt edge to the west here. Quick look at plan 5, please. So this just shows what the apartment blocks would look like on the development. We've got 5 apartment blocks. There'll be 2 in this corner up here, and then 3 down the bottom here as well. So moving on to the landscaping. So this is an illustrative version of what the landscaping could look like on the site. So we're looking at various trees, hedge planting, native and ornamental shrub planting, and turf and seeded areas. There'll be 1 tree located in the lobby green. That's an existing tree there, so that area's been designed around that tree in terms of its appearance. The council's arboriculturalist does not object. The county urban design officer considers more details required and there's more opportunity for tree planting. This can be dealt with by discharge of planning condition 21, which is attached to the approved outline application. That covered dealing with all the landscaping matters on the entire site, so the entire outline development, including phase 1, so we can deal with a lot of the landscaping matters, getting more detail as part of that discharge of condition process. So moving on to the layout now, and the elements of the layout. If we could look at plan 2 again, please. Okay. So the density, we're looking at high density of 38.7 dwelling per hectares to the east of the access road. So this area here would be the higher density area, close to the school, where you've got the more sort of terraced, closer knit dwellings. Then we've got a medium to the northwest corner, so this area over here of about 27.9 dwelling per hectare, and a low of about 25.4 to the southwest part of the site as well. And that is mostly in accordance with what was agreed as part of the discharge and condition process for the density arrangements at the site. The dwelling mix would be from 1 to 5 bed units, which is considered to be a good mix of dwellings across the site. With regards to 1 metre separations that we look for, there are 33 dwellings and 2 apartment blocks that do not quite meet this requirement. However, in some instances, this is only a small corner of a dwelling, for example, and there are still visual gaps provided through this guidance through car parking spaces, open grass verges, gardens and open space. Therefore, it's not considered a reason for refusal, and we've considered it that way on other developments that we've dealt with. With regards to residential amenity, there's no detrimental impact considered on existing neighbouring dwellings. There are 12 instances where the 25 metre and 15 metre separation distances that the Essex Design Guide gives us guidance on are not provided. However, the relationships between those dwellings on the development are still considered to be acceptable. The technical housing standards are met across the development. Conditions were attached to the outline application with regards to water efficiency and energy. Details of those have been submitted and we are likely to be considered acceptable, but we're consulting with the building control team on that for further information. There are 6 wheelchair accessible units that have been identified as well, and they are within those apartment blocks that we've identified already down here and up here, and that's in accordance with our policy, that number of units. With regards to amenity with the layout, the flats and flat overground units all provide either balconies or communal space in accordance with our policy. 2 of the dwellings are not considered to comply with the garden size criteria within SPD2. However, these still provide gardens of 91 and 97 square metres. And the development and surrounding strategic landscape, looking at the quantity that we've got surrounding the development, is considered to still provide a good level of open space for those 2 dwellings, and it's not considered to be a justified reason for refusal here. The size of the local greens is also considered to be acceptable. So the local greens are that area there, which is adjoining the school, and also there's a local green up here which has been incorporated partly into the strategic landscape there, and they're considered to be appropriate sizing for the development. The lobby green oak view, which is this area here that we've been referring to, is slightly below the sizing requirement within the outline application by 0.03 hectares. However, the wider site provides a large quantity of open space. We've got a non-material amendment application submitted just to amend that, and also the developer has increased the size of this area, which is outside of the application site, so we'll see that come forward in future phase applications, but that has been increased to absorb the slight difference between this sizing that we've seen here. If we move on to Plan 7, we look at the waste and refuse proposal. So this is what we're seeing with regards to the refuse strategy on the site. So you can see these are all the swept path analysis where the refuse vehicle would track throughout the development on the site, all these areas here. That's considered to form an acceptable arrangement on the proposal. Bin storage would either be within garages or rear gardens, and the apartment blocks would have their own communal stores to provide the necessary storage. There are 5 locations across the development where the drag distance is beyond the 25 metres, but in most cases this is still between 27.5 and 30 metres, so that's considered to still be an acceptable arrangement for this size of development. So moving on to the scale of units that we're looking at on the site. So this is the building height parameter plan that we looked at and agreed as part of the outline application. So this permitted heights of up to 3 storeys, so 12.5 metres to the east of the main access road, so along this side here, and up to 2.5 storeys, so 11 metres in height to the west of the main access road. And the proposal accords with this. We're looking at predominantly 2-storey dwellings across the estate. See the apartment blocks would be the 3-storey elements, and we do see some house types that are 2.5-storey, but the predominance is going to be 2-storey across the phase 1 development. So the last element to discuss, so we've gone through the various aspects that need to be discussed as part of this reserved matters application. The affordable housing is just the last element to mention, because there are 68 units required as part of phase 1, so 55 would need to be affordable rent and 13 intermediate. We originally saw a proposed tenure mix submitted as part of this application, tenure mix change, with more one-bed units proposed. Concerns were raised from our strategic housing team regarding that, and as a result, we had a change to that submitted, and we're now, the only change we're looking at now is a proposal for one extra 2-bed versus one less 3-bed on the estate, and a 4-bedroom unit would now be intermediate rather than an affordable rent. So we'd still be looking at 35% affordable housing according to policy, and we would still be looking at an 80-20% split in accordance with policy. And the strategic housing team did not object to that change that we're seeing. And the affordable housing, you can see, is the purple and the orange on the development. So we see we've got an area up there, and then an area down here, and then sort of a bit more scattering around this sort of section here. So that's where the affordable housing is proposed on site, just to sort of show on a plan where it would be. The applicant has provided a brochure summary to members that you may well have seen. Just to mention, this is not additional information. It's not required for you to reach a view on this application. It's just an informative to assist you in understanding the proposal put forward tonight. To conclude, this application is recommended for approval by officers subject to conditions as shown in their full wording on the addendum. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So just for the sake of clarity, it's the areas within the red boundary that we're talking about, so we need to focus on those and on the particular points mentioned on 1.7. So this is a fairly comprehensive application. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. A little bit of concern about the oak tree that's there. I should imagine that's been there quite a substantial amount of time, and there's a very good chance it may well be there for considerably longer after the houses have gone. How is that going to be protected from, it's quite adjacent to a new piece of road that's going in and development. How is that going to be protected? Is it going to be screened off? And how is the water supply to that tree going to be protected? Because we take too much water away, we're going to lose that tree. So perhaps officers can clarify that for me a little bit. And the other question I wanted to ask, the main spine road that runs from north to south, in the centre of the road there's like some black bits in the middle of the road. Can officers clarify what they are, please?
They can, but that element doesn't form part of the application.
No, just...
But for clarity, yeah. Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as concerns the open spaces, what arrangements are to be made for their future maintenance?
Okay.
Is that to remain in the hands of the developer or future purchasers in a company?
We'll take the questions as a group. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. There was mention of cycle paths. Are these outside of the red marked areas? I can't see any separate cycle paths within them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mountain.
Chairman, it was in relation to affordable housing. I understand the percentage is correct, but I believed our policy was to have a bit more pepper potting. And what I saw on that map was that there were clearly identifiable areas at the north, never eat shredded wheat, northeast and southeast, but there was absolutely none on the west side of the development. And I would hope that there would have been slightly more pepper potting in relation to the affordable housing.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Hoy.
Essex Highways, page 613, 4.37. Will officers please confirm which applicant Essex Highways are referring to and why? It's where they weren't consulted. I have a basic few points to run. Turn it on. Yes. The 1 metre separation, 33 do not comply. 25 metres back to back, 12 do not comply. Garden sizes, 8 do not comply. Oak trees open space is below the size agreed, page 6.36. 5.62. 5 locations where bin stores do not comply, page 6.37, 5.66. Perhaps individually, one of these failures to comply with our policies may be allowed. The sheer number of issues suggests a poor planned development. I've also wanted to ask a question. In your conditions, you've got, where is it? You've got where conditions are, and you've got number 6, security measures, rear side access way to terrace units to be agreed, incorporating security code, self-closing lockable gates. But there's nothing in this report to say where those gates are.
Okay. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. My comments relate to what Councillor Mountain stated, that we would normally like to see much more pepper potting of the affordable housing, and it seems to be clumped in 2 main areas. It doesn't seem to be a fair spread across the whole of the development.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll bring your attention to page 6.5, 4.6, 4.5, in the way of surface water from both areas, or the 3 areas, where that is going to go. I noticed that there's a moat round the outside, but it doesn't tell me where that's where it's going to go and how we're going to deal with that situation from the properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Chairman. Whoops, my little red light. Chairman, I'm a little bit disturbed. You just remarked a little while ago that the central spine stroke access road is not part of this application.
Not part of this consideration tonight. It's been considered elsewhere.
Can we not, please, somehow ensure that that road is actually built before what is in a really large development, and there would be a certain amount of chaos with muck and rubbish going out onto Rawrith Lane. You know, it's such an essential part of the whole development. I think really somehow we ought to condition that this road is built before they do this.
Yeah, we hear your point, but it's not part of what we're looking at specifically tonight.
When can we get a chance to actually say build that road first?
We'll sort out that detail with, or you can ask the officers after the meeting about the phasing of the things. Right, I think we've got quite a range of questions. There's no new points that anyone wants to make. Have you got on your list? I'll tick them off as you go. Oak tree first.
Okay, so I think I'm hopefully going to be able to cover everything. Yes, firstly, the oak tree. Yes, that is. We had a condition on the outline application which required protection of existing trees and hedgerows on the site. So that will be controlled through that outline application, the details that we'll need for that. Hopefully that's answered that one. The spine road north to south and the black aspect shown on it.
The dark line in the road was the other one.
Sorry?
The dark line in the middle of the road.
Yeah, so the black marks located within the spine road. It's not something that we've been given detail on as part of this application, because where we're not considering the spine road, so it's not something I'm afraid I can provide an answer on what that actually details. The spine road has been agreed as part of the outline application, so I don't know the detail around what that's demonstrating. The open spaces, how they're going to be controlled, we've got a 106 agreement, and part of that requires maintenance arrangements, agreed maintenance arrangements of our open spaces on the site. So that will be dealt with and controlled through that process. Cycle paths were also mentioned. So there will be some cycle paths outside of the red-lined area, which has already been considered separately to this application. It's not as part of this application. However, the secondary access road, which I'll just zoom out a minute and then show it a bit clearer. So, do you mind? That's it. So that'll be enough. So
where we've got the secondary road here, we have 2 metre wide paths either side here, so these will be able to provide cycle provision around here. Also, this is a 2 metre wide pathway coming through here, so that you'll be able to provide cycle provision going through that route as well within the development. With regards to the affordable housing and the pepper potting, if I go to that plan actually. So we do have, it's not, I should mention, it's not for consideration as part of this application, the actual locations of the affordable housing. We were just looking at a change proposed to the slight provision mix change. That was why it was submitted to us. This was more of an indicative information really that was submitted to assist understanding where the affordable housing was going on the site. We're looking at the detail of that will be dealt with through the 106 application details, which they will need to give us information on as part of the 106. So we will need to agree locations of the affordable housing as part of that, but it's not considered that this is necessarily objectionable. It's not uncommon. Although we have pepper potting, it's also the case that often housing associations like, for maintenance purposes, for units to be relatively closer together in terms of their maintenance arrangements for those units. So that's why we have a little bit more collection in some areas on the site. Do you want to? Yeah, so as part of phase 2 and 3, we would expect again sort of further mixing. So when you look at it actually across a whole, you'll see further spacing of affordable housing coming through as part of later development on the site. Mention was made of paragraph 4.37 and the Highways Agency. The Highways Agency actually are only commonly consulted on part of very larger scale developments. They said they hadn't been consulted on the previous application, but that's not uncommon, and they haven't provided. It's the A12 I think they're mostly concerned about, so it's not something that we need to be concerned about or as part of this application, that they didn't have consultation as part of the previous application, and they haven't provided any comment on this application saying that they have any issue as such. So yes, so they deal with the main sort of trunk roads on and any development which is going to affect the main trunk roads. Mention was made about 1 metre separations, the distances between dwellings, gardens, bin stores, lobby green, about some of those elements with some dwellings here and there not quite complying. It's still considered, even though there are elements of those aren't quite met, collectively it's still considered that we're looking at a scheme which is considered to be acceptable on the site. So we've looked at that, we've obviously looked at how many elements are not quite met, and it's still considered that for this scale of development, for 192 dwellings, that although there might be some that are not quite met, I mean the gardens it's only 2, it's not considered that would be a justified reason for refusal on the site. That's officers' view on that element. With regards to condition 6, the security gates, where will they be located? Well, we don't have detail of that at this stage. That's why we will be putting that condition on, requesting that kind of detail to be agreed. Those kind of units that we're referring to, though, are... Yeah, so it's like... zoom in on this bit up here. So it's this kind of area that we're looking at up here, where we've got sort of links through to the rear access ways, and trying to deal with that kind of element in sort of making sure we've got sort of gated accesses. It's commonly something that we get from Essex Police as a suggestion, although we haven't had comment from them on this application. It's something that we've followed through from previous applications with regards to terraced units. So that's where sort of that comes from. We'll get the detail that we can then hopefully agree to as part of a discharge and condition process. With regards to surface water drainage, we have dealt with the surface water drainage, or the drainage elements of the site as part of phase 1 within the discharge condition of condition 34 as part of the outline application. So we have got agreed details for phase 1 with regards to surface water drainage on the site. The Spine Road, with regards to the building out of that, I presume that was on the lines of the construction management side of things, was it? In terms of construction stage? Okay. We have a construction management condition as part of the outline application. That will look at a whole manner of different elements that we will need to agree to in terms of how the development will be built out. So it will look at where loading and unloading will take place, wheel washing facilities. It will look at how vehicles will manoeuvre on and off of the site. So that can be considered as part of that discharge of condition process, so we can look at whether that's a possibility at that stage, but it's not to be considered as part of this application because we've got that controlled separately in terms of looking at it as a discharge of condition as part of the agreed outline application. I think
Yeah.
that's all I had.
Councillor Stanley.
So-
Thank you, Chair. The 2 points that I want to bring up, not only from another councillor, is about cycle paths. Are there footpaths on the site? And where we've got here 6.7, page 6.7, 4.15, where SUDs say they are fairly confident. What does that mean exactly, please?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
One off, one on. Yeah.
So just referring to the drainage element while I've got that part in front of me. That sort of comment that we've had from the county lead local flood authority is when they were still at the stage then that we were considering the discharge of condition details. So this, you'll see from the date of the comment that we had in, that was in September last year. So we had the discharge of condition details in, they were considering it, and so they provided this comment whilst that was still under consideration. They hadn't fully looked at it at that stage. They now have looked at it, and they have now agreed that they are happy with the details that we were provided as part of that discharge of condition request, separate to this application. So there was a separate process for the drainage because we had a condition attached to the outline application that had to be followed. The applicant has provided the detail for the drainage elements as part of the outline application, and the lead local flood authority have said that they were happy with what they've seen in terms of phase 1, and the details have been agreed on that basis.
Okay. Councillor Mountain.
Thank you, Chairman. A little bit confused still in relation to the affordable housing as to what I heard, that on one hand I do understand that it is in the interest of the provider to have properties close together, but then on the other hand I was told that this is just an example that actually further down the line we're going to see different locations for affordable housing. Now I fully understand, phase 1, what was agreed in phase 1. Now this is phase 2, but at what point is this the last time we see this? So is affordable housing something that's going to be discussed more in phase 3, or if not, is there any way that can be added to the conditions that we would like further pepper potting? So I'm looking at that in 6 quadrants: top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right. That we would have affordable housing in all of those 4 areas.
I think the other thing on the affordable one was when the other complete areas of the site come forward. This is just 192. There's obviously 500 over the entire site, and as they come forward, it offers the opportunity for the pepper potting and the mix. But sorry, Councillor Oldham.
Can I ask, is the siting and layout and such of cycleways and footpaths part of this application, or will it be dealt with separately at some other time?
Do that.
Within the red-lined areas of the development we're looking at now, it is for consideration. So there are going to be obviously other cycleways and pathways, and you can already see some outside of the red line that are proposed to be provided within the strategic landscaping. So the areas to the north, for example, you can see all pathways kind of coming around here as well. But that's not for consideration, but there are elements within the development which are for consideration. So you've got to say the footpath coming through here. You've got shared surface areas which
again, are for pedestrians and vehicles to use. You've got the pathways on the main road around here coming through. There is a pathway along one of these roads to an extent as well. So there are cycleways and pathways within this development that are being considered as well. But there will also be ones that you'll look at later in terms of later phases too.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, I'm mainly concerned with what one might call recreational pathways rather than access pathways. I've had a contact from the Essex Bridleways Association, and it refers to item page 443, 44, item 6, where they were told at the outline stage that consideration would be given to making these footpaths, cycleways, etc., up to bridleway standard, and there appears to be nothing in this particular report covering that sort of thing. So is it possible that we could condition this in some way?
Well,
that these areas are taken
we do
into
have
account?
condition 11 that says all independent pathways shall be
Where's
two.
condition 11?
That's on the addendum. All independent pathways shall be a minimum of 2 metres wide.
Does that
So
make
I
them
guess
pro-
that's what you're getting to.
Does that make them
Just to mention, yes, we can get to the cycleways and the pathways elements. With regards to the bridleways, which I think is the reason behind the bridleways comments, they're looking for, or in their comments, they were looking for a bridleway access within what they're calling the western corridor of the site. So that's outside, they were looking for something outside of the red line boundary, yeah, within the strategic landscape area. And we looked at this as part of the strategic landscape application that we had back in December. We consulted with County Highways Rights of Way, and they were concerned about the proposal because they felt that it was unsafe because there was no access over Wharf Lane, and they were concerned about the London Road and Wharf Lane connections and where it would lead to and the safety elements, and it wasn't something that they were going to be prepared to take on themselves. And for that reason, we didn't take it forward as part of the strategic landscaping. So it's outside of this red line boundary now, but we did look at it previously, and that was the conclusion that was reached on it.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Hoy.
Yeah, hiya. I wanted to bring up the 1 metre separation again or whatever. I mean, we're going to have a lot of developments coming through. We have a policy of a 1 metre separation. Sort of, you can't say, developers, you don't have to comply with the 1 metre separation, but if you want to build an extension, you do have to comply. So, on that basis, I won't be voting for this.
Councillor Gooding.
On the shared surface, which is running down the centre of the 1, 2, 3, fourth quarter over here, are the areas wide enough to get the bin vehicles down?
We had that plan. That's the one. Yeah.
Yes, so just to confirm, yes, it is accessible. It's 5.5 metres wide, and the minimum that you need for a refuse vehicle is 5 metres. So because it's a shared access way, it would have the 5 metre distance minimum that you need for a refuse vehicle to get down there.
Condition 14 as well. Members, we've had an opportunity to explore the various bits and pieces. The recommendation is printed in full in the addendum. There are 16 of them in total with the reasoning. Sorry, Councillor Mrs Hoy. I mean.
Can I recommend reviews or just?
Well, I'm moving the approval now. If that fails, then. So, those members in favour of the approval on the issues within the red line site and the items that are specifically for consideration tonight? Those members in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Those against? Okay, that item is carried. Thank you. Item 7 is a little bit more technical than we normally look at, because it is the reserved matters with regard to gas and electricity substations, utility infrastructure. Again, small amount of information on page 6 of the addendum.
Chairman, this is a reserved matters application for the proposed utility infrastructure in association with the development approved for up to 500 dwellings by Outland Planning Permission, land north of London Road and south of Royal Flame Rayleigh. There are 6 intended locations for the infrastructure, so this location plan just shows where the 6 are just in the context of the site as it is at the moment. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then the 6th one just at the bottom there. The development incorporates No, sorry, I haven't loaded those ones. So the development incorporates 4 electricity substations, an electricity intake station and a gas pressure reduction installation, a PRI. So they are located, the intake substation is down here. The 4 electricity substations are 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the gas PRI is that one located there. No, sorry. The intake substation posts at the southern end of the site, northwest of Lower Barn Farm. The 4 substations are spaced across the development, so 1 is within the residential development of phase 1, 2 are along the main Spine Road, so that's the residential one within phase 1, 2 Spine Road, and the 4th close to the school site. Within this, and that's within the strategic landscaping for phase 1. The gas PRI will be located within the northeast part of the site within the strategic landscaping area. Plan 3. So the gas PRI will be flat roofed in design to a height of 2.25 metres. So this is what the gas PRI would look like. Quite modest design and sizing. We have plan 4, please. So the 4 substations would have 3 roof design options. So flat, then we've got a gable pitch and a hipped pitch design. The flat would be 2.85 metres in height and the pitch would be 4.3 metres. And the last plan, so plan 5, is the intake substation. That would be the largest in floor area. So as you can see, that's the largest sizing and would have a pitch roof to a height of 4 metres. The key material planning considerations are layout and design. So with regards to layout, if we could pop back to plan 2, please, sorry. So substations 1 and 3 would be located within those residential developable areas which is considered acceptable. Substation 4 and the gas PRI within the strategic landscaping, whilst this is located within a soft landscaped area of the site, visible from Warwick Industrial Estate Road, it's considered these would still integrate into the landscape as they are set back from the road by between 6 and 9 metres and are located within a large swathe of soft landscaping. They are located within the most functional positions for their requirements. Substation 2 and the intake substation are located within areas identified as natural and semi-natural green space on the approved parameters plan for the outline application accessed from the Spine Road. So that's these 2 here, so they would be in the green space. However, substation 2 is modest in size, although it's in a prominent position, and with the use of soft landscaping, such positioning is not going to consider to appear prominent here. The intake substation will be located near to the boundary of Lower Barn Farm. So here it's not far away from Lower Barn Farm. This property has a collection of buildings and hedging on its boundary, and the positioning of the intake substation would not be considered detrimental to the occupiers of this property. There are 2 trees located near to the proposed intake substation. However, they will be located approximately 24 metres from the substation, and its positioning is therefore not considered to be detrimental to these trees. The intake substation with the buildings and parking areas at Lower Barn Farm as a backdrop will not appear to be prominent in this location. If we could pop back to plan 4, just thank you. So there are 3 roof design options for the substations. It's not considered that a flat roof design would be acceptable within quite visible locations, and a pitched gable roof, whilst a more attractive design, would create a prominent roof form for these buildings. So it's considered that a hipped roof should be controlled by planning condition here. If we could look at plan 3, sorry, thank you. The gas POI building shows a flat roof. If a pitched hip roof is achievable for this building, that should also be controlled by planning condition, is our proposal. However, we don't know from functional position whether that's definitely the case, so that will be adapted within the condition to reflect that. The County Urban Design Officer has advised that we should ensure that the materials for the infrastructure correctly relate to the parcels within the development, and a condition has been suggested regarding materials. This application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as shown in their full wording on the addendum. Thank you.
Councillor Stanley.
With reference to the area where the school is, whereabouts is that substation on that plot? And you're going to take. I thought you were going to take them all at the end. Oh, right. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Right in the corner.
Yeah, I'm somewhat concerned about the substation being so close to the school, depending on where the school is going to be built. My other pointer is that the height of the roof on the substations, is that the minimum height as they're designed to make them less obtrusive, less seen in the street scene. Also, the area where we're talking about for substation 1, is that in a grassed area or amenity area? Because if you're going to put substations in, you're taking up the amenity areas that you're putting them into. Thank you.
Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chairman. Whichever design is selected, will there be a security wall or a security fence around the outside of the buildings? Thank you.
Do you want to come back on those 2 then, please?
So with regards to the school substation, might be able to zoom in a little bit more, but it's so we're looking at this one just here. It's been positioned there partly as well for the actual purpose of the school, considering obviously the amount of electricity it's likely to generate. So it's a functional reason for it to be located there as well, close to the school site. I'm not aware of any particular concerns of its location in relation to the school. Nothing's been expressed like that. And we don't have details yet of the exact positioning of the school. It may be that they have a car parking area up here, but it's not something of concern or consideration really as part of this application. With regards to the minimum height for the substation, we haven't been told that there's a minimum below what we're currently seeing. Having said that, it's not the actual heighting that we're looking at is not too dissimilar to some of the garages that we would have on the overall development of the scheme. So a 4 metre with a pitch, it would not be objectionable in terms of designing to its total pitch height, as long as it's to a hipped style as well, which would lessen its impact. With regards to substation 1, so that one so we're looking at within the area of the phase 1 residential development. It's not within an amenity space. It's been given its own dedicated area within the residential envelope. So it's not taking up space, any allocated amenity space or anything like that. With regard to security wall or fence around buildings, we haven't been told of anything like that that's been proposed. However, commonly you do expect to see that sort of thing for safety reasons around those kind of buildings, but we haven't been, it's not before us currently in terms of proposal.
I think just in terms of the security one, the security fences used to be when you had the old-fashioned exposed transformers. It's the building itself that they're in that provides them with the security nowadays. So quite technical, apart from the physical locations. So members, there's a recommendation printed on page 7.6 and slightly amended reasons on page 6 of the addendum. Those members in favour of the approval, please indicate. Those against? That item is carried. And I think that's the lot. Thank you very much for your time, consideration and thoughts tonight.